All right, good morning. We are live on YouTube on the Falcons Podcast. We're going to bring our Facebook pages. That's Atlanta Falcons on SI and Scott Kennedy Sports. Once we have those, we will get going. It's been a week since we've seen y'all. A lot has changed since then, so we want to get into all of it. Welcome to the Falcons Podcast. It is Wednesday, January 22nd from the frozen tundra of Johns Creek. Yes, we are out of school for the second day in a row and kind of made fun of it a little bit because there's hardly any precip on the ground. But now the social media images are starting to circle, and not everybody got unscathed, especially, Fulton County is a huge county. And if part of it is unsafe, then they'll close the whole county. So I'm like, all right, well, I see that yesterday. There actually was some fairly dangerous weather out there for Southerners. So hope everybody was safe out there. I know it's cold as heck. I spent 3 days in Scandinavia over the weekend. I went to Norway, to Sweden, and to Denmark. Came home and it was 10 degrees colder in Atlanta than any place I had just been over the weekend. So it's been strange. And Nick, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing pretty well. Can't complain too much. Work has been a little bit of a Charlie Foxtrot since I got back from my month of parental leave. And the little guy's popping some teeth right now. So he's been not the most pleasant to be around. But it's whatever. It is what it is. He's doing his best, as we all are. But excited. Denver's out, and I'm really annoyed about the Chiefs. I'm hoping that they lose, although that's me like falling for it again, probably. And yeah, excited, man. What is it? Is it next week? The Senior Bowl? Is it the week after? I mean, it's pretty much here.
We leave on Monday. Senior Bowl starts on Tuesday. Practices start Tuesday morning, so we leave on Monday. And Corey says, I thought Scott was looking more Swedish since the last time I saw him. Yep, spent a day in Gothenburg, Sweden, and it was very cool. It was a whirlwind trip again, 3 countries in 3 days. So I didn't really sightsee or do anything like that. And frankly, everything was just kind of covered in snow. But it was fun to get out and just be around new people, new countries. And I just love to travel. So got to,
any good food?
Not really. I'm a vegetarian, so it's hard for me to do foodie type things.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything too, off the wall, as far as the food goes, but the food was good that I had, breakfast, omelets. It's kind of like you'd eat here, except better. Like everything was twice as expensive. I'm like, it better be good. So had a good time, but we go on this show live every Monday and Wednesday because we like having the conversation with y'all. And I want to say hello to some folks that have come in nice and early, like Curtis. Curtis comes in. He says, "Good morning, Scott and Nick," but he's agreeing with Alfred. So we'll read Alfred's comments real quick. He says, "I've completely lost any faith in this administration, Scott. My hope at this point is that after another terribly disappointing year, blank cleans house from the towel boy to Rich McKay." And that's what Curtis agrees on. And he goes as far as to say with a super chat, and thank you for breaking the ice on that super chat, getting us started. It is the single best way to support what we do here. Curtis says, "We better be a deep playoff team. If not, everyone needs to be fired." Curtis, that's not going to happen. If they go 10-7 and make the playoffs, that's going to be considered a step in the right direction, a good season, and it will be moving. And frankly, at this point, I'll consider it, frankly, a step in the right direction, even if it's just going from 8-9 to 10-7. I haven't had a winning season since 2017. What's that? This will be the 8th season now. Haven't made the playoffs since then. Got to get started somewhere. Got to break the ice on that and get back in it. Get the young guys some experience. But, I feel good about the offense. Now it's time to invest in the defense. This team has been so unbalanced for so long that it's time. It's like, we need an edge rusher. We need a defensive tackle. We need a corner, wide receiver, tight end, running back. God bless. Please. It's time to invest in the defense, Nick. It's time.
Yeah. It'd be hard to walk away not in the first round as a defensive player. You have a lot of good offensive infrastructure. We'll see what happens with the tackle spot and the tight end spot on this team. Obviously, those are 2 areas, but I say that to Broncos fans too. They are obsessed with Tyler Warren, who's a hell of a tight end from Penn State, but it's like you don't have to only use your first round pick to improve your team. You have other selections, you have free agency, blah, blah, blah. Now, the Falcons are a little bit more hamstrung there in terms of picks and cap after the trades they made last year and the Kirk Cousins deal. But also, I'll say the same thing to you guys that I'll say to Broncos country. You can make all these moves in the offseason, blah, blah, blah. The number one thing that's going to move the needle of your team is how much that quarterback improves, how much that young quarterback improves. That is going to be, you can make some big splash plays, whatever, hit home run on your first pick. If your quarterback goes from a 75 to a 82, they're just using some Adam ratings there out of 100, that's probably going to be the biggest improvement on your team because it's going to be an exponential trickle down to everywhere else.
And this one, I don't agree.
No,
not for this team because the defense was so bad.
Yeah.
The defense was so bad. I mean, when you score 38 or whatever it was against the Panthers and lose, I'll take 38, Nick.
Yeah.
It's like if they could just stay where they are right there, I'll take it. I'll take it right now. But, what you're saying, though, is, I think Michael Penix was even across, his games, like the same amount of touchdowns and interceptions. Obviously, you want to see that improve. And obviously, the interceptions weren't all his fault. We know that, too.
Yeah.
So, the timing and all of that stuff, I mean, not even throwing a pass to Drake London or Darnell Mooney until the week before he's supposed to start. And, the defenders of the program, and yes, I know you're out there, that will defend your team no matter what they do, no matter how much they lose. By God, everything they do is right. God, I've never rooted for a team like that. It must be amazing to always know that whatever your team does is the right thing. Every team, their number ones throw to the number ones, and their number twos are the backups. That's nothing new. This is different. This is different. This is a guy you have for 2 years that you knew at most you were going to have for 2 years, and a rookie quarterback is a little different. Even if they go out on their own, go out there after practice and start throwing around a little bit, it's a little different. So that was still a little bit of a surprise to me. Coach coming in, Nick. Coach says, good morning, fan. Welcome back, Scott. Thank you. It's only gone a few days, but it seems like it's been a while. And he says, win the day. And one of the things that changed, Nick, I don't know if it was Friday or Saturday. I got my time zones kind of mixed up because I was going to bed and woke up and saw it 2 a.m. That they had made their hire. The Falcons had made their hire, and they'd hired Jeff Ulbrich. Now, we had pretty much assumed it was going to be Ulbrich or Steve Wilks. Just we wrote an article on SI. These are the 2 to watch. These are the guys with ties. Yes, it is a buddy system. These are the guys with ties, and frankly, they've had success in their latest roles. So, that part too. What can you tell us, about Steve Ulbrich and the Jets and how things might change? And what were your thoughts on the hire?
I mean, it made sense, right? We always say it's not what you know, it's who you know. It's all about connections. So Ulbrich will be a good hire. One thing he has going for him is it's going to be hard to not improve the unit from what they had out there in Atlanta, out there in Atlanta this season. It's kind of hard to say exactly what he's going to bring, what tenets he's going to preach for the defense because of how much the Jets have been the exact opposite of the Falcons in terms of resource investment on the defense. I mean, you have first round pick after first round pick after first round pick and hits on the defensive line. You have a top 4 pick at cornerback as well, but especially the defensive line. I mean, they've had 3 or 4 guys that they invested there on the defensive line, and they even had first round picks that they traded away on that unit as well. So an embarrassment of riches. That's one thing that I would assume they're going to try to bring over is the emphasis along the defensive trenches and depth of the positions and everything like that. And also when you have a cornerback like Sauce Gardner, granted very, very grabby, you can do some different things out there coverage wise. So they're going to bring a physicality to their defense. I think they're going to be much more aggressive and hopefully just a better unit this season. I mean, I will give Lake some credit. I thought they did try to switch some things up, but it was too little too late. And at the end, it fell apart all the same. So like Ulbrich makes sense. Maybe not a home run hire, but again, it's going to be hard to be worse than what the Falcons and Lake looked like this season.
Yeah, and as Curtis says, we passed on some good DCs for a mediocre DC. Now, I do want to get into that because, and I want to say hello to some more folks here coming up, but we're going to circle back to Jeff Ulbrich. Make no mistake about that, because I don't quite feel there is a lot of negativity about this hire, and I'm not there. And part of it was because I think Jimmy Lake's did the worst job coaching a defense I've ever seen, ever, except maybe at the high school level. So for me, it's almost like anybody but Lake, and it's an improvement, and I'm happier. But, I want to get into, some of the questions here real quick before we circle back to Ulbrich. From Derek, he says, "Good morning, Scott. We're enjoying snow here in middle Georgia." Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, all across the panhandle, places that just don't get snow didn't just get here's a flurry. I mean, they got snow. They got a couple inches of accumulation. That doesn't happen south of Macon. So that's it's pretty cool. Like I said, stay safe out there. It's not just the snow. We came from California when we moved to New Jersey. My wife had a 2-wheel drive with summer tires on it. I drove it to the train station, and it started snowing on my way back from work, and I'm barely getting back into my driveway with her car as it started snowing. I'm sitting in a flat driveway waiting for the garage to go up, and it snowed enough under those tires that I got stuck on a flat driveway with 30 seconds of snow, and I got stuck, and the car was there for a week. That's how unprepared. I called it a toboggan. I'm like, my wife owns a toboggan. Those summer tires on 2-wheel drive. So be safe out there in the snow, y'all. If you're not prepared for it, if you don't have at least all-wheel drive in all season, stay home. It'll be gone soon. But who would your be pick to team up with Ulbrich on the defensive line? Derek, I don't know the coaches well enough to say this is the guy that you should go. I know who has success, and that's where I'd start looking. And when I start looking, I look at Pittsburgh, I look at Baltimore. When I start looking at defenses, Nick, and personnel moves and who develops and why, I don't have I don't know. Who would I go after on the defensive line? I don't know the coaches well enough to be able to answer that for Derek.
I think you also look at D'Amico Ryans, and maybe Houston has some options as well, because he took a bunch of the 49ers with him, and that's following Saleh. That's kind of the coaching tree there. So that's another area. Also, Houston had a unbelievable defense this season, so that's another area to look for. But I don't know. I mean, coaches really do matter, of course. They'll probably bring some assistant defensive line coach up, or maybe bring some of the Jet staff over as well, the kind of murkies with the Saleh going over to the 49ers. But we'll see. But again, Scott and I are key believers that it's more about the Jimmies and Joes than the X's and O's. So we'll report, and once we have background information on those people, we'll talk about it. But really just need to improve the talent on the defensive side of the wall.
Carrie, good morning. It's great to see you. She says, "Good morning, everyone." I was upset when I got the news Saturday night, but I'm more in the acceptance stage now because I can't change anything. I just hope Raheem hiring another friend works out. And Carrie, that's fine. The acceptance, again, you can't do anything about it. It's the rationalization that people do that I get tired of, that I just get sick of in this business. I call it the fandom, the everything is awesome crowd. It's like, oh man, that's the worst hire in the world. And then nothing changes for 2 weeks, but they've talked their way into it being the best hire in the world because of the bias and that the rationalization. I'm like, nothing's changed. Why are you changing? Because you're biased. That's fine, but admit it. So Carrie, acceptance is good. You can't do anything about it. So we'll kick back. We'll discuss whether we think it's a good hire or not. We'll analyze as it goes along, and then we'll see how it turns out. That's what we do. We will be here. The one thing I always remind people, Falcons fans, you will be here. You're the only ones that are in this for the long haul. The professionals, it is a job. Raheem Morris, pretty good chance he's not going to be here in 5 years. You will be. You will be. You will be a Falcons. And the only one that you normally say will be here in 5 years is the owner. Not so sure about that one. Not to be morbid, but, it's just Father Time's undefeated. Mm-hmm. You will be here in 5 years. You're in it for the long haul. Yeah. These players, these coaches, it's jobs. They're professionals. They'll move on to the next one tomorrow if they need to. So, yes, accept, and we will see how it goes. Unfortunately, we just, as Falcons fans, you'd like to have a little bit more success through the years, through the long haul. John says, "Good morning. Why do we feel bringing guys back that we already have? Who do we feed bringing guys back that we already? John's just trying to say, how do we feel about it? I think about
Ulbrich coming back.
Bringing back Raheem and bringing back Ulbrich. What do you think about that, Nick?
I don't think it's always a bad thing, of course. Speaking again, following the Denver Broncos, Vance Joseph, head coach, didn't work out, brought him back, and now he's been the coordinator of a top 5 defense this season. So it's not top three times.
No, 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, top 5 in points and yards, 3 straight years.
Yeah. So you're talking Ulbrich there.
Yeah, I'm talking Ulbrich with the
Yeah. I was like, Broncos didn't have that last year. Okay, yeah. But yeah, no, he's been a good coordinator on defense. And again, familiarity does matter. It's not always having the best, smartest person in the room, because it's about the collective and how they work together. So you're removing some of the unknown there. Now, there is the word cronyism there. You want to make sure you're hiring competent folks still all the same, not just buddies, giving them a job and a shot. But Ulbrich's done it. He's been respected. I know that former players have spoken highly about him as well. Takeo Spikes, Patrick Willis, big fans of Ulbrich when he was a player back in the day. And he's, again, the Jets, before Salah and Ulbrich came over to the Jets, they were one of the worst defenses in football, and they turned that around. Now, granted, again, premium investments on that side of the ball. But, yeah, teams do this. You know, they want to know what the cohesion of the unit and people they trust that aren't going to, be detractors in the room, having the same unified message. That does matter. Coaches do that all the time. They'll fire somebody who's relatively competent and on the surface looks like they're doing a good job, but their former buddy of a long time became available that they trust. They know there's no questions. They'll make the switch.
That just happened in New England. Yep. with Vrabel moving in after 1 year. So Austin says, I'm unsure about the Ulbrich hire. I would prefer someone who Ra has not worked with. And I wonder if we take away, I feel like that part of the gnashing of teeth about this is the fact that he was here already. And pretty much anything that has been touched by the Falcons, with a few exceptions, has been tainted, through the years. I don't think anybody has quit on their own, retired after, a long season, a long career of sustained success with the Atlanta Falcons. I think Mike Smith is the all-time winningest coach with the Atlanta Falcons. I think Dan Quinn is like 3rd, and Dan Reeves, and there's only like 2 or 3 of them that have more than 5 games that are over 500. It's tough. But if you remove that, I know you can't, but if you do and you say, okay, we just hired a guy that had been working under Robert Saleh, who has been calling the plays according to New York press, and they'll figure it out, who has been calling the plays for 3 straight top 5 defenses. Falcons haven't been a top 5 defense. I think we talked about this, and if I'm remembering right, they've only had 3 top 10 in total yards in the last 40 years, 3 of them. I think they went to the Super Bowl in 2 of those. And no top 5 defenses in total yards. And the Jets have had 3 straight top 5. Top 5. You just hired this guy. You're bringing in that defensive coordinator who's been that. If I look at that and I say, okay, the Jets are ass. They're a disaster of an organization. They're even more dysfunctional than the Atlanta Falcons. Yet here they are with their defense is the only thing worth hanging your hat on, especially after you talk about the investment they've put on the defensive side of the ball. Brother, they put some into the offensive side too. With Sam Darnold in the 1st and 3 seconds, Garrett Wilson, they've gotten a couple of offensive linemen. They've invested there, and they still come away top 5. We're going to hire that guy. All right. Okay, I'm interested. That sounds good until you go back and say, wait a minute. This is the same staff that was interim staff in 2020 for the Atlanta Falcons. What are we doing? And that's where you have the problem. But have they grown? Are there different circumstances? Is Jeff Ulbrich a lot better than what we had as a personnel with the 2020 defense then? I'm willing to find out. I like the hire. I really do. I like the hire, and partially because my bias is Jimmy Lake was so bad. I'll admit it. But I like the hire.
Yeah, and given what he had to deal with the Jets over his time there, I mean, there's probably no more toxic work environment in the NFL than the Jets with Woody Johnson and Aaron Rodgers. So there's got to be something to be said about the quote unquote leader of men. And we'll see. Again, it's to me, it's more about personnel at the end of the day. And what did the Jets use last year, Scott? They were one of the highest rates of cover one man coverage teams in the NFL. They ran it 30% of the time, which would have been the 5th most in the league. After that, you see some cover 3 sprinkled in, but not crazy amount. Cover 4, some cover 6 as well. They're higher in that. Almost no cover 0, almost no cover 2. So they're not very super blitz oriented, sending the house, and not cover 2 as well. So the 2 deep safeties. So quarter, half, mixing stuff up from cover 3 to cover 2, probably spinning a safety down late. We'll see what that looks like. But to me, if you're running cover 1, you're going to have to be able to get after the quarterback, because you cannot play man coverage for more than 3.5, 4 seconds. You could have Patrick Surtain and Derek Stingley out there, probably the best 2-man cornerbacks in football. They're going to have a hard time if you can't get home. Granted, I'd rather have those guys and see what it looks like, but so need cornerbacks for sure. And you need pass rush.
Pamela, good morning. Great to see you. Roy, hope you're doing well. He's had surgery on his thumb, so hope you're doing better, Roy. I know you're a little dizzy, so take some time. Troy says, "Sup, guys? We got snow here in South Georgia. It's crazy. But anyways, with Helms, AJ Anderson, and Bates, we're going to run Quinn's defense again, aren't we? Rook and Jarrett going to benefit." Yeah, I mean, I think Onyemata's toast. I think that's a foregone conclusion. There's $9 million in savings there. He didn't play very well. The big question is going to be Grady Jarrett. I think there's $16 million in available savings there, and you're getting to the point now where we'll just restructure. Yeah, but restructure adds years. I think he's going to be 32. We're getting to the point where you don't want to add years to Grady Jarrett's contract.
Yeah.
It's, you end up with a $10 million dead cap, and he's 35 years old and can't play. So there's going to be some questions there. Rook showed some really nice flashes in his limited time last year. Looking forward to seeing more of him. And as far as Anderson, I'm thinking Troy Anderson. I'm not counting on him for anything, because you can't count on him for anything. And Helms coming off an injury with 2 starts to his name in his career. I'm not counting on him for a whole hell of a lot either. Same thing goes for Braylon Trice. Well, don't forget, we get Braylon Trice back. Yeah? What's that mean? What is he proven in this league as a 3rd round? That's a non-premium pick, a 3rd round for an edge rusher coming off of an injury. I'm not counting on a thing from him either. So if you get something from Helms, if you get something from Anderson, if you get something from DeMarco, great. But I'm going into the offseason thinking I need starters in every one of those places. Linebacker, safety, cornerback 2, frankly, and edge rusher for sure, Nick.
Yeah, and Falcons can't be picky. You just got to nail some picks and get some guys with, as I like to say, gravity on that side of that ball. Did you ever play the old school NCAA football back in the day?
Oh, yeah.
They had the impact players with like the white highlight on them. There's none of them. Well, I guess you have AJ Terrell, Bates. You have some guys on that side, but you need more. You need guys who can.
There's 3 nice pieces there, but 3 out of 11 isn't good enough.
Yeah, I really got to get some impact players on the defensive line and or a cornerback. Cornerback's weird in this draft. Maybe somebody could rise up, but it feels like there's a chasm between the top 2 guys, and then after that, I think you're gonna have a chance at somebody with your 2nd round pick. All the same, but I see we got Corey Carter coming in saying with a $1.99 super chat. Thank you so much, Corey. He says trade back for Ben Morrison or Jack Sawyer. I'm not as big on Ben Morrison, cornerback from Notre Dame. I don't think he is. He's got good instincts, and I think he makes the most of his athletic ability, but I don't see a premium cornerback athlete out there. And he's also coming off a hip injury, which for a cornerback, that is a red flag. Other than maybe ankle or something, hips for cornerbacks are so important. So I would be a little trepidatious with Ben Morrison. The dark horse, I think, is Ravel from Eastern Carolina. He's coming off an injury, though, but he is long. If you're looking to play man coverage cornerback, that would be an interesting one.
And I'm hoping somebody shows up like Quinyon Mitchell, Nick. Some of these guys from some of the non-Power 5 schools that are like, and Quinyon showed up at the Senior Bowl. Jim Nagy does a fantastic job of assembling the team there, the 200 players there. Mm-hmm. And, there's a couple, half a dozen to 10 to a dozen that come out from the smaller schools that end up being really, really good players. Quinn Miners, Creed Humphreys, Quinyon Mitchell. We could go on and on and on in the few years that I've been down there.
I will say that there was buzz for Quinyon Mitchell pretty early on, before the Senior Bowl as well. I think that Dane Brugler had him in the late first round of his mock, like in November. I don't know if
Okay.
anybody's emerged like that right now, where it's like this guy's an obvious athlete. But
They're
that
all new to
said,
me, so maybe I'm talking out of my hiney.
yeah. So the guys that I'm keeping an eye on, there's Thomas from Florida State. He's very aggressive, long cornerback. You got Maxwell at Kentucky, who's interesting to me. You got Brown from Texas. I think Brown. Maybe it's Barron. The guy who won the Jim Thorpe Award. He's kind of getting some late first round love. And then Amos from Ole Miss. So those are the heap of 4 cornerbacks outside the top 2 to 3 that I'm keeping an eye on right now. Somebody's going to rise. Jack Sawyer's, I mean, I don't think he's got a crazy high ceiling by any means, but he's a culture guy, no doubt. So wouldn't be against him. The other, I think it was you, Scott, that mentioned the other Ohio State edge rusher too, JT Tumaleo.
Wouldn't have been me. I promise you that it wouldn't have been
Okay.
me.
He also is another good player as well. But 15 seems a little early for both of them.
Yeah, the teams I watched this year really were Florida and Auburn, and then whoever they happen to play, I might notice some guys. But I have a professional interest in the Florida Gators and Auburn Tigers. I'm the managing editor for those 2 sites on SI, so I watched those games, but I didn't watch much else. Much else after that, except for some splash plays you might see. Hey, that Texas guy is really, really freaking fast. They got a running back, but I didn't. That was, I don't even remember who they were playing, but they couldn't freaking catch that dude. And
Clemson. It was Clemson, Texas, probably.
Was it Clemson?
Okay.
I was like, they can't catch that guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I know there's been some talk in there about Jack Sawyer again, football players. He's obviously a player. Now let's see the measurement. Is it close? Does he have the enough factor? There's more than 2, because you get into the personality and the background checks. That's the third. That's the one we really don't have access to. But the 2 factors you're looking at when scouting are, playmaking ability. Do they make plays? And then physical ability. And if you see one before the other, then you go, okay, I've seen enough here that I want to see here and make sure that they mesh up.
Mm-hmm.
You take a guy like, looking at Mel Kiper's recent mock draft, and Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart has the physical ability to be a number 1 overall pick. The dude doesn't make plays. He's got 1.5 sacks. He's very unproductive. That scares the crap out of me when we're talking about, Atlanta Falcons.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the kind of guy that goes at number 25 to the Baltimore Ravens and ends up an all-pro. It's also the kind of guy that ends up at the Atlanta Falcons and ends up a bust. Scares the crap out of me. So yeah. I lean more towards the football player when I'm talking about Atlanta Falcons, Nick.
Yeah, they need to hit a double. We've said that on here a few times. So you have the really talented player in obviously Shamar Stewart, but going to be some other options there. I think that Field, Yates, and Mel Kiper did a back-to-back mock. They alternated picks, and they had Michael Williams going to the Falcons, another guy who's got some. Yeah, I know they never take Bulldogs, but just let's humor it. We're 92 days away from the draft, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Mark Schrader, $15 super chat. Thank you so much, Mark. He says, "Good morning, Nick and Scott. How are your roads, Scott? Hopefully they're pretty good."
Around here, around where I am on northeast Metro Atlanta, I'm up in Alpharetta, Johns Creek. It was fine for the most part, but I guess I'm down by the river, and I'm down by the river, and there was a light dusting across like my porch furniture. That was it. But up and down 400, there was some pretty nasty stuff going on. I'm like, all right, now I see why you canceled school. Not just because it was 15 degrees. I'm like, you're canceling school today because it's 15 with a high of 33 and it's going to be sunny. Well, it's a big county, and they're just not prepared. And one bus goes off the road. Why didn't you cancel school? We can do remote learning if we need to. We're fine. So we're okay. Cheers, Mark. Thank you for the support. I hope you are doing well. We've got friends, obviously you all do, we have friends all over the country. And I'm getting videos from New Orleans from my buddy down there. And I got 2 inches of snow on the ground in New Orleans. It's the hottest place I've ever been in my life is Baton Rouge, Louisiana in September. So this is a crazy one for sure. Let's see, Eddie, I want to get you next. I wanted to say hello to Chris had something to say. Chris, hopefully I can find it again. It was this one, your first one, Chris. Good to see you, Chris. You've been with us since we started this up. He says, the defense is definitely in need of upgrading, but the offensive line concerns me. Do we move on from Kyle Pitts? I hope Grant is gone. He's been a huge disappointment, and we probably shouldn't have picked him in round 2. In hindsight, there's no probably about it. He was a bust, and his contract's up 4 years. He is a free agent. Richie Grant was a bust. I liked him at the Senior Bowl. I liked the pick at the time. I liked the fact that they even trade down and still got him, but he was a bust. Do you move on from Kyle Pitts? Maybe. We'll see. If you move on from Kyle Pitts, it's because of his attitude. If they make a trade, it's because they think this guy has a bad attitude, he's lazy, and he won't work. If they hold on to Kyle Pitts, it's because it's just not working. But we're not going to give up on him because he works hard and he is a good teammate. So that's kind of what it will tell me as this plays out. Would I take him based on production? I would take $5 million in a day 3 pick. That would be what I would take for the trade. That's what it would take, because he's on 11. He's on 11 guaranteed. $5 million gets me a starting linebacker, gets me a starting safety. It gets me a really good backup defensive lineman, third defensive lineman. $5 million is good money on the defense. Gets me a third corner, gets me a good nickel. And then a day 3 pick gives me a lottery, another pick that I need, Nick.
Yeah. It would make sense for the Falcons to do that if you want to cut bait. I mean, you always say it. I know you pull it from elsewhere, but a coach killer type, right? Like Kyle Pitts is just so tantalizing. You see him out there. And
it's Anthony Richardson right now, as an example.
Yeah.
Anthony Richardson is that guy on a bigger scale because he's a quarterback.
Yeah, without a doubt. So, again, I don't know Kyle Pitts. He had that his rookie season was awesome, statistically speaking, on a Falcons team that was picking 4th overall, like not overly talented when they brought him in there. And he had a good year and then had that injury and just has not been able to get his feet under him since then. So I don't know if a change of scenery helps him or anything, but they definitely seem like a team that probably should be looking to maybe move him on. I don't know if they're going to hold out because like one big season, especially with where tight ends are at, and you're getting a round 4 compensatory pick.
Tag him. Because he's a tight end, you tag him.
Probably.
You'd franchise tag him, and then that would be. I wouldn't want to give him a multi-year deal because I don't trust him enough. He had a big year in a contract here. I'd tag him, and if he doesn't want to play on the tag now, if he has a big season now, I can get a second for him. I can tag and trade him and get something much bigger out of that. So if he's doing the work, and if he is a good teammate, then you hold on to him. You hold on to him through the rest of this season. And if you feel like he's not putting in the work, he's not taking care of his body, he's not being a good professional. That's the best way to put it for me. If he's being a good professional, you hold on to him for this year.
Yep.
If he's not being a good professional, you move on. That will be the answer for me, because you're not going to get an offer for him that makes it worth trading him for the potential that's still there for a 24-year-old uber physically talented guy for $10 million. You're not going to get that offer that makes that trade worth it. So it will really be off the field stuff for me, Nick.
And as far as the offensive line goes, I mean, you're never going to get a negative grade from me for investing in the offensive line and having questions about the offensive line, because the needs and the issues on the defense are so loud and obvious. The offensive line has been put on the back burner a little bit, but you're moving on. You're probably losing your center, Drew Dahlman. We'll see there, but that's a key piece.
I don't think so. I think
you think
he's
going to come back
before you go to free agency. I think he comes back.
I hope so. He's a good scheme fit as well, and just for the stability and the chemistry. And we'll see what happens with McGarry. But when you have a young quarterback right now who's had the injury histories that he's had, and I know Michael Penix tested well as far as the 40 and stuff, but he doesn't play like Jaden Daniels. He's a little bit.
He's not a scrambler at all.
No, he doesn't really have the twitch, so to speak. Also, and again, the injury history with him as well. So you're never going to get negative grades for me for investing in the offensive line. It is not a offensive line draft per se. So at 15 overall, I don't know what the value is there, but again, like a big picture for Michael Penix. You have the weaponry right now. You need defense to make sure that he doesn't have to go out there and play, a shootout every game. But offensive line protecting him, taking him off the high dive, winning on first and second down, so it's not obvious pass on third down. Those are all things to think about. It's kind of hard to get there before the defense, right? But it is something that's a viable pathway for this team that Scott, we've talked about every single offseason, right? I mean, with the McGarry questions there at right tackle, Matthews getting long in the tooth, et cetera, et cetera. And if you look at the teams right now, I mean, the teams that were in the final 8, almost every single one of them was in the top half in the offensive line this season. So it's definitely something to at least ponder 92 days away from the draft.
I've been able to come back from the Senior Bowl to pick out a day 2 or day 3 offensive tackle that has ended up being a starter in the league. Well, that's what we're going to be on the lookout for, y'all. When we come back and say, this is your guy this time. Whether it was Spencer Burford. What is first name Spencer? Because
Brown.
Well, Spencer Brown. But who was Burford? He was taken, wasn't he, by the Bears, ended up starting as a rookie?
No, that's Braxton Jones.
No, it's not. That's Braxton Jones, but there was a Burford that ended up playing.
Burford ended up going round 4 or 5 to the 49ers, and I think he played guard for them. He's been okay.
He played, but there's guys that are there. After I mentioned smaller schools, where did Creed Humphrey play?
Oklahoma.
Okay, it wasn't that small then. Apologies. So back into when you go back, when someone says, what do you mean small player guys? Creed went to Oklahoma. Yes, when I said that, I'm like, wait a minute. I had Nebraska in my head after I said that. I'm like, that doesn't sound right to me.
No, he's OU.
Yeah, but he was they took him pretty high. I think he went high second.
He's second rounder.
Yeah,
I think
he
late
was
second.
really good down there. That first class I went down there of offensive linemen ended up being really, really good. Quinn Miners was in that class. Creed Humphrey was in that class. Spencer Brown was in that class. Each one of those guys is making like 15 million. Is making 8 figures now. So
the other guy in that class that I don't know if he was down at the Senior Bowl, but I liked him a lot, and he's ended up being one of the more underrated offensive linemen in football. Granted, I have as many misses as hits, so I won't pat myself on the back too hard there. But Zach Tom, does that name ring a bell there, Scott?
It does, but I don't think he was there. I think that was the guy that you just liked the whole time. Was that the Oklahoma State guy?
Okay.
Yeah.
No, he's Wake Forest, and he ended up going 4th round to the Packers.
Yeah, I think that was the guy you just talked about a lot. I don't remember him being there.
Okay.
Corey Carter, but he's talking about right tackle. He says Holland Pierce out of Rutgers on end of day 2, beginning of day 3 at right tackle might be a decent pick. I don't know much about him, Corey.
Yeah, I have not watched much Rutgers. I can tell you that I've been doing a lot of running back work because Denver needs running back, and I like their guy Manungai, but Falcons do not need running back. One thing.
Not this draft. Maybe next draft they need a running back, a day 3 guy, but not right now. Eddie, good to see you. Says what the Falcons need is a change in attitude. This town needs an enema. I think Coach Jeff will bring that change. As a player, he was tough, played with injuries, and was a hard hitter. Killer and attack attitude. Atlanta also needs to add linebacker and an edge rusher. Yeah, Eddie, when it comes to this draft, we got asked before, are you going to be surprised by the Falcons draft again? There's really only 2 ways that this team could go in the first round that would surprise me. Quarterback and running back. That's really it. I mean, even if they went tight end, you'd say, okay, they're trying to replace Kyle Pitts. I don't agree with it, but I understand it. This isn't the way I'd want to go, but I'm not like jaw-dropping, oh my God, here, unless they go and sign a tight end for $30 million guaranteed and then draft another tight end in the first round. Then that would be a different conversation, but they would never do something like that, would they?
There's no tight end worth it this offseason, so I'd say you're pretty safe.
Otherwise, yes, you talk about they need to add linebacker. Yes, they do. Well, they need to add edge rusher. Yes, they do. They need cornerback too. Yes. They need nickel. Yes. They need safety. Yes. They need another starting defensive lineman. Yes. So best in the first round, best defensive player, pretty much flat out. And there is no way that you can't put him on the field. No way. You're like, well, you got AJ Terrell and Jesse Bates. Yeah, well, I need 3 corners on the field. I need 2 safeties on the field. So there's a spot there. Rook, if you're playing a 4-3, maybe, Rook and Grady have spots in Sharpie, maybe. Not for sure. And I can still move things around, and I can play 3 defensive linemen. And obviously, you need edge players, pressure players, period. There isn't anybody safe on that bunch. Appreciate you, Eddie. Rusty coming back in. And he says, my fear out of all this is we waste Michael Penix with a bad defense and poor coaching staff. Excuse me. Need to see if this staff is sooner rather than later. And if they have another season like this year, there might be a change after just 2 seasons. There might be. If they miss the playoffs again, there might be. It might be just 2 years with Raheem Morris, and then they're changing things over again. But Rusty, we wrote the headline was, the Falcons cannot turn Michael Penix into another Matt Ryan. And it was funny. We've talked about this before on here. It was funny, the different responses. Most people kind of understood it. It was like Matt Ryan is one of the top 10 most productive quarterbacks of all time. And that was wasted by mismanagement across the board. We can say bad defenses and this, but it was the offensive line was trash for most of his career. The defense was trash for most of his career. What he had was good skill players around him. And then, a bunch of different offensive coordinators and coaches, mismanaged salary cap, and Matt Ryan's career, a top 10 quarterback in this league, was wasted. Do not do that again with Michael Penix.
Yeah.
It starts on defense, Nick.
I think it starts with offensive line. But I would
with this team, I feel okay about the offensive line. Again, you scored 30 plus points in 2 games and lost them both in overtime because you never saw the ball. Mm-hmm. Couldn't get the guys off the field.
Yep. I'm with you. I still think big picture, 3-season sample, like you need to shoot to have a perennial top 12 offensive line. And just a microcosm of that is what we saw this year with CJ Stroud up front. Now, some of that was scheme as well, but the Texans had a top 3 defense. But man, they could not do anything on the interior offensive line specifically. And I don't want to say it's ruined CJ Stroud, but he regressed massively and he developed some bad habits. He just did not look like the same guy. And I think CJ Stroud's the type of quarterback you're hoping for with Penix there. Can scramble sometimes, has the testing stuff, but really it's the pocket stuff and the WTF, how did he get it in that window, anticipatory stuff. And you got to make sure they're comfortable. So I agree, Scott. But I don't want to be so defensive. It's like 99%, 95%
right now. Right now. For this upcoming offseason, you got to rebuild the defense. For Michael Penix's career, I need to protect him, and I need to make sure that Drake is Drake for the next decade, and then add to that for sure.
Yeah, but my only pushback again is like you're sitting there at 15 and your best guy's an offensive lineman on the board that can play right tackle. I think it's a conversation, at least this far out in the draft. The odds of that happening are not super high because you have way more needs and possibility on defense. But big picture, that's like the only move where it's like, okay, I get it. I understand why you would do that. Even if it is using your most important resource to not help the biggest hole in the team, the most important thing is making sure that you got that guy, left-hander, heat thrower, safe and feeling comfortable and progressing. So
there's a reason I said there's only 2 spots that would absolutely make my jaw drop: running back and quarterback. Otherwise, offensive line, okay. Jake's getting old. Jake's getting older. He's been in the league since 2011. I'm not sure how long it's been. It's been a while. He's in his 30s. He played great this last season. Matthew Bergeron could end up being a tackle. They could move him out. Well, then you need a left guard. Drew Dahlman is a free agent. Okay, bring him back. Chris Lindstrom is set there, but and then McGarry is kind of questionable still. So offensive line is on the table. It is.
Yeah, has to be at this point. And I also see Trenton coming in with Wyatt Millum. If you move Bergeron to right tackle, I think Millum would be an interesting choice. I think he's a good zone offensive lineman. I don't think he's a tackle in the NFL, though. I think he's much more of a guard type. So we'll see what happens with him. I'm not sure if he's at the Senior Bowl or anything. We got Ramiro Gomez coming in here.
Gomez Jr. He says, I keep thinking, why do we keep bringing back guys that got us to a Super Bowl that we lost in embarrassingly bad fashion? But then I think, hey, we made it to a Super Bowl. Yeah, exactly. That was kind of Ramiro. talking about, Vikings fans like, well, just wait till you get to the playoffs and Kirk cracks the bed. Playoffs? Falcons would take the playoffs right now. They would absolutely take 10-7 in a first round out in Kirk Cousins' first year, or, first season. Yeah, would have taken that in a heartbeat. Who do you think you're talking to here? This is right now. This has been a poverty franchise. We're working on, let's see, the second longest streak out of the playoffs. I think we're tied with one other team. I think Jets have the longest, and I think it's the Falcons, and I think the Falcons and Broncos were tied. So maybe the Falcons all by themselves now, but it was like Falcons and Panthers or somebody was tied for the second longest streak without going to the playoffs. Yeah. Playoffs sound nice. They do it. It sounds pretty nice. We're going to wrap this up here pretty quick. Let me just circle back to the Mel Kiper mock draft. He ended up taking with the draft. He took Shamar Stewart, defensive end, Texas A&M. Just talking about 6'6", 290 pounds. His athletic traits could push him up the board because we know how bad Atlanta's defense was. But here's the thing. So Stewart didn't rack up sacks in college. He had 1.5 in 2024, but he has the potential to break out in a big way in the pros. Oh, no, I don't like that. I don't like that at 15. Trade back. If he's still there at 30 and you pick up another day 2 pick, okay. I don't like that at 15. Not for this team. They've had too many guys just like, oh, they're combine warriors. They measured well, and then they don't produce. That's the legacy of the Atlanta Falcons. And I'll leave you with this thing, then I'll hand it over. It's Billy Beane in Moneyball. If he's a good hitter, why doesn't he hit? Because he's not a good hitter. We're not selling jeans here, folks. We're not selling jeans. Yeah, he's pretty. He's 6'6", 290. But his production stinks. Now, that just might not be the right fit for this team.
Yeah, I don't know if it makes sense for the leeway that Terry Fontenot has as well. I don't think he's got the ability to play home run derby right now. So he's one that would be – he's going to test and move amazing, Scott. And maybe you're going to see him down there at the Senior Bowl, maybe in actual one-on-ones, and they put him in at 4i or something, and he looks completely different out there. But the lack of production is concerning. I mean, you think of you remember Jason, now Odafe Owe, coming out of Penn State, had 0 sacks, but had a crazy number of pressures, but tested like an absolute freak. And he's been a good player for the Ravens. But the Ravens have built up enough capital and have leeway with DeCosta and their coaching staff that they can afford to take those type of swings.
And I just don't think the 20s also.
Yeah, I think he went 22.
They took him in the late 20s.
26, something like that. Yeah,
and he didn't just test okay.
I think Stewart's going to be similar fashion as far as testing goes. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if we have a Trevon Walker ascent. Maybe not the 1 overall, but into the top 10, I would not be shocked one bit. So also people say that he is wired the right way, which goes a long way for coaches. But we'll see what happens.
We'll see. Stewart's going to the Senior Bowl, isn't he?
That's exactly.
Okay. So that'll be a different thing because, again, stats don't tell the whole story by any stretch of the imagination. Stats are a team thing, and when you go to the Senior Bowl, you take guys and you put them in a controlled environment, meaning I'm asking this guy to do the same thing as this guy. I want to put you in a situation where it will translate to the pros. I'm not asking you to play 7 technique way out wide outside of the offensive tackle and rush the passer as a 6'6", 290-pound edge rusher. That's crazy. But can you move inside? Can you play a defensive end spot at 6'6", 290? Do you have it in you? Physically, yeah. But, do you have the mentality to do that? Corey says the Falcons start losing next season in the draft. When's the last time the Falcons came out of the draft with glowing reviews? It's been a while. It's been a while, and we always like to say, oh, that stuff doesn't matter. And what do these guys know? And well, what do they know? Where have the Falcons come? Oh, trust the coaches, trust the staff, trust Terry Fontenot. What have they shown you that says they deserve your blind faith? And again, going back to Kerry at the very beginning, there's nothing you can do about it. But that doesn't mean I have to like it. It doesn't mean I have to automatically have blind faith and say, oh, yeah, man, this is the right thing to do. Like I said, I've never rooted for a team where every time whatever they do is the right thing to do. But by God, there's some people in our comments that they root for that team no matter what they do. But there again, this will be really hard, unless there's a huge reach or something. Whoever they take will fill a need this year. Whoever they take will fill a need. They didn't do that last year by any stretch of the imagination. And we said that going after the draft. This was a draft for 2026. It turns out a lot of it was for 2025. They drafted a bunch of guys to replace their 30-year-old starters. That's what they did last year. This year will be different. This year they've got enough holes that unless they go offensive tackle, if they go defense, then that guy's playing next year. That flat out. If they go defense, he is playing next year.
Yeah. Without a doubt. There's not a pathway where you don't see a guy play on this team. You need somebody at every single spot, and the spots that where you maybe don't need somebody, it's a rotational defensive line spot. So plenty of options there to improve this team, no doubt. And we'll see what happens. We got Derek Collins.
15's not too early to take a difference maker at inside linebacker if you think he's there. Yeah. It's not necessarily a non-premium position, but the lack of athleticism outside of Caden Ellis at inside linebacker was a killer for this last team. Now, hopefully you won't put them on basically they were on an island. They were put in just acres of space by Jimmy Lake and JD Bertrand and Nate Landman. That's just not what they do. They're phone booth fighters. They need to be attacking the line of scrimmage. They need to be taking on guards and playing in a box, not dropping 7 yards off the line of scrimmage and looking around and chasing guys. That was just asinine. So linebacker with speed, basically a healthy Troy Anderson, but I'm not counting on Troy Anderson. I'm drafting a Troy Anderson replacement. That's where I'm looking for.
And the guys you're talking about there that could be there at 15, you got Jalen Walker out of Georgia, which I feel like his stock has been – it's all over the place right now. But, you watch him play, and he's a heat-seeking missile. You got Jihad Campbell out of Alabama, who is athletic and body beautiful, which does – linebacker is such a neck-up position. But, so many of these linebackers now are like 220, 225, and they just – what are the Ravens? What are the Eagles? What are the Bills doing that? Okay. Bet you're going to play a 220 linebacker. God bless you. We're going to beat the absolute tar out of you. So somebody who actually has the size to play inside with the athleticism. Again, it's a risky position to take round one, given historical return on investment. But
it's a big need to hit.
Yeah, it's a need. So those two guys stand out. There's as far as non-premium players in the first round, non-premium positions first round. There's two linebackers who are we just touched on, and there's two safeties. And also Malachi Starks from Georgia and Nick Emanawari, who's a 6'3", 220-pound, great athlete from South Carolina that some people are trying to put the Kyle Pitts comparison on, which I think is – I don't like comparing guys to unicorns, right? That's like, every single
Ohio State quarterback. You hear that a lot.
It's like, I don't know about that.
I don't trust Ohio State quarterbacks.
Yeah. Nick Emanawari, though, the other guy to keep an eye on from South Carolina.
Real quick, we sound strange. Good to see you. He says, Scott, you ever think you might get a scouting position with the Falcons? I trust you way more than our other draft picks. No, I'm too old for that. It's just a different pathway. If I had to do it over again, I'd know exactly the type of path I need to take. I'd be a walk-on at a college for at least a year, and then I would sleep as a graduate assistant. I'd sleep on the couch and work your way up from that. That just wasn't. I didn't know that at the time, and not sure I'd do it over again. When I was director of scouting, it didn't quite work. Like Barton Simmons, he played college. If you don't know who Barton Simmons is, Barton Simmons was a director of scouting at 24/7 while I was director of scouting at Scout. And Barton Simmons ended up getting hired to be the general manager of football for the Vanderbilt Commodores. But he played. He played. I think he played safety at an Ivy League school. So he's a smart dude. But you got to have that in your background. So to move on. But he's one of those guys that moved on from what I do into the football ranks, and it's a tough way to live. It can be, because if you get 3 to 4 years there, you might be moving all over the place, and you settle some kids in a family, it becomes becomes tougher. So I've made a living doing this, and I'm thankful for it. And I've had a great time with all of y'all. And we're going to get out of here, Nick. So let me say some thank yous who have come in to guys like Curtis and Coach and Corey coming in a couple times. Eddie, we see you over there on Facebook. Rusty, appreciate you over there. Mark Schrader coming in with the big yellow super chat. Helps keep these lights on. Helps keep my forehead nice and shiny and helps me let out and go out and scout for you. That's who I scout for. But we're going to be back on Monday. We'll talk a little bit of Senior Bowl, but, we'll talk more Senior Bowl on Wednesday, the day after the first practice. But next week is Senior Bowl week. We'll be here on Monday. And they'll be from Mobile and Wednesday. Nick, any last words?
No. Good to see the Falcons get a defensive coordinator and get some stability. And now it's time for the offseason and adding talent to this team and hopefully resetting things. And just because there's going to be a lot of dead cap, just because you missed on the quarterback doesn't mean you can't be in a good position next season. Just look at Denver, the Rams, also unbelievable amount of dead cap. So it's possible.
My last words are, I look at the Falcons bringing in a guy who had top 5 defenses for an organization that is more dysfunctional, the Atlanta Falcons, and he did it 3 years in a row. That's their new defensive coordinator, and I'm excited to see what he can do. I like the hire. Doesn't work. We already know it's a 1-year deal. So we can be patient. I want to see how it works out, and I want to see how they attack the personnel in the offseason. The offense is pretty well set. Let's get to work on the defense. 3-4 players can be had in this draft, and with the free agency money that you have, and 3-4 players on the defense will make a huge freaking difference. On that note, we're going to get out of here. Thanks for being here, y'all. We'll see you next time. Stay safe out there, everybody.